Good morning. I want to thank Michael, who just disappeared, but there he is, for just doing exactly what we needed this morning. I don't know about you, but just what a heavy weekend, you know? Waking up to the news yesterday and just breathing that is just hard. So thank you for taking us there, Michael. And I did a meditation thing in the early service because we didn't have a Michael. So I'm not going to take you through that, but would like to just pray with you for a moment, and then we'll go forward. So would you pray with me? So God, love divine, who is here in this space, buoying us, carrying us, breathing for us, sighs too deep for words. We need you, and you are here. Help us be honest with all that we're feeling, with all that we're grieving. Be honest about the angst that we feel, the complex emotions that we feel as we journey through this thing together. Remind us, God, that this is the human experience, that this is not a new thing. It doesn't make it all better. It's not a silver lining. But you have walked with billions upon billions of people through such a time as this. Remind us that there is a deeper current than the chaos and the mess of life. And that current is lovely because it is love. That current is shalom. It comes from shalom. It's headed toward shalom, and it's shalom all the way. Deep peace, well-being, harmony. May we tie into that in these chaotic times. May we draw from that because we can, and because that is what is. Help us remind each other that we have each other, that we find more of you in our midst when we come together. And may we continue to breathe and breathe again and breathe again, remembering that you are our breath. I ask this in the name of Jesus, who we follow. Amen. So, welcome. We're so glad you're here today. I've got a friend that is with us today. First, I just want you to notice the screen here is part of our improvements that we're wanting to make around here. We've been wanting, you can barely tell the difference in image between the projection and the screen. So we've been wanting to do something like this for a long time, and it finally became very, very affordable. So fingers crossed next week we'll have displays that you can read, so when we throw stuff up on the screens, you can read it, and when we do little video clips or whatever, you can actually make it out, so we're happy about that. And thank you to Ted and his mighty men for putting those up this coming week. That'll be really nice. So yeah, give them a hand. Very good. Very good. So my friend, Jonathon Foster, I met him the first time I went to an open and relational theological conference up in Grand Tetons, where Tom Ward has his annual thing. And I was kind of new going into this, had become a fan of Tom's work, and it really resonated with me. But it was a whole new group of people. I was coming into that conference from a wounded place, because that was a time in my history and Crosswalk's history where I got canned from a part-time gig helping our region sort through pastoral support stuff and running that. That was the same time when our church was told to find a new region or less be kicked out of our current denominational region because I married a gay couple who I was thrilled to marry. And so I was coming into this wondering, all right, is there anybody out there that we can resonate with, and people that were like-minded? And Jonathon befriended me, and we had conversation, our deepest conversation, at least at that point. They certainly did more and even beyond that, but I think it was over ice cream social at the end of one evening. And and we found out we had a lot in common. My dad and both grandfathers were in ministry, pastoral ministry. So were his. He'd been struggling with and coming to a different way of thinking from a conservative tradition on LGBTQ equality and equity and all that, and that got him in trouble, just like me. And our language and our experience just continued to resonate. So I immediately began to really value our friendship. And as he will describe in his talk today, he knows a thing or two about loss and suffering and what do we do with that, and has a profound way to interface with that that I think you're going to find really, really helpful. And we have some of his books in the back for $10. He's not here to sell books, even though he'll joke around by that. You're not taking any of them home, because I found his book, Indigo, which I even have a fancy slide for. I found his book, Indigo, incredibly helpful for people who are going through suffering of various kinds. And I want to keep those books because I know I'm going to give them to people over time who are going through it. And the people I've already given it to here at Crosswalk have reported back, this was so profoundly helpful. So if you have ever gone through suffering and would like a little help thinking that through, this book is not a how-to book. It's a how do you live with this kind of a book. And it's poetic and beautiful. And anyway, I'll stop talking about it so you can hear from the guy himself. He's going to have his talk and then have some time for Q&A. So look forward to that. We had robust questions in the first service, so I'm counting on you to outdo them this morning. All right. Please welcome my friend, Jonathon Foster.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Thank you. And you got to leave, too.
Pretty soon.
Yeah, okay. Okay, all right. Wow, so great to be here today. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm glad this worked out. And I was befriending Pete. I thought he was befriending me. I didn't realize that it was reciprocal like that. And yeah, honored to be here. Honored to talk about the subject matter. Honored to talk anywhere, but particularly about the subject matter. But also just a real joy to be with Pete. I really appreciate the work that he's done here, and I really love the pastoring he's done. And I don't always say that when I get up in front of people. I just want to make sure you guys know you got a really good one here, right? You know that? So that's nice. So thank you for having me, and thanks for mentioning the book. I do appreciate that. I've got a few other books back there as well, but Indigo in particular. People like Rob Bell and Brian McLaren and Paul Young, who wrote The Shack, has become a friend of mine through that. They're talking about it, slightly embarrassing to say, but publishers like it when we mention those kinds of things. So actually, I'm doing a writing retreat with Paul Young, so if any of you are writers this summer, come hang out with us for a weekend in Flagstaff. And I like to say that between Paul and I, we've sold over 20 million books. So that's how that works. All right, there's a handful of different ways I can tell this story, infinite amount, but I think today I'm going to go at it in this direction. So take a breath. I hope you can be here with this, and I know it'll get intense, but I know that love is with us, irrespective. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, a very strange thing happened in my family. As far as I can remember, this never happened any other time, but my parents took me to a concert, which was highly unusual, particularly for my dad, to take me to a concert. We lived in Council Bluffs, Iowa. We drove across the river to the big city of Omaha, Nebraska. Now, don't get carried away. It wasn't like anyone super cool, like, Fleetwood Mac or Air Supply or something like that. Like super cool, Air Supply fans in the house. Some of you are like, are you disrespecting my favorite band? It wasn't like that, but how many of you are old enough or gospel nerdy enough to remember Andre Crouch and the Disciples? Let me see your hands. That's right. So we went to a concert on a Sunday afternoon, blew my mind, and really in a lot of ways, though I didn't have the language for it at the time, it was like a time-released capsule that was kind of put inside of me, because I experienced colors and sounds and chords and things that I had never experienced before. Previous to that moment, the entirety of my musical vernacular could fit inside of a little tiny box. By the way, that box was about the size a Church of the Nazarene hymnal could fit inside, so that gives you an idea what we're working with. But that afternoon blew my mind. It was really, really beautiful and kind of opened me up to complexity and interesting things in a way that I'd never had experienced before. So we used to sing an Andre Crouch song at our church back in the day, back in the late 1900s, as I overheard one of our kids say recently. I was like, wait a minute, I think that's right, the late 1900s. So we sang a few songs, Andre Crouch. Of course, we didn't sing them on Sunday morning. Those were hymns. But Sunday night, chorus time, we would break out certain songs. How many of you remember the song, Jesus is the Answer? Because we're going to sing it together. I'm going to teach it to you. It's super simple. But, and if you remember it, help me out. It goes like this. Jesus is the answer for a world today. Above him there's no other. Jesus is the way. And just repeats. Jesus is the answer for a world today. Come on, let me hear you. Above him there's no other. Jesus is the way. Nice. Very nice singing. It's really a great song. Particularly for the era that I grew up in, when you think about like Midwestern, Caucasian, Bible-believing, late 1900s group, it kind of did everything it was supposed to do. Musically, lyrically, it was pretty simple, although when Andre Crouch and the disciples did it, they added some stuff that was very interesting. But musically, it was simple, it was easy to sing, and lyrically, it encapsulates pretty much everything that group wanted you to know growing up, which is just simply, Jesus is the answer. Doesn't matter what question you have, Jesus is the answer. Trying to figure out how to vote, Jesus is the answer. Figuring out your sexuality, stop, don't even think about it, Jesus is the answer. It's interesting. And so growing up in that, like, I have really very little to complain about, legalism notwithstanding. I love my dad. The heritage I got from my grandparents, that church, that whole context was really pretty good to me. And at the time, I just leaned into it. Like, yeah, Jesus is the answer. And I really tried to make that livable. And in some respects, it was. After a while, as we're going to talk about a little bit, it kind of wasn't. It wasn't so much the Jesus part was a problem. It was like the whole formulaic way it kind of gets pressured onto you. Jesus is the answer. Like Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Everything had to be the answer. It reminds me of the Sunday school teacher. She's teaching the 7-year-olds, and she's like, what's brown and furry, eats nuts, and lives in a tree? And the little guy raises his hand. He's already defeated, and he's like, I'm pretty sure it's a squirrel, but I'm going to say Jesus. She's like, correct. That is the answer. So, and you all can relate to that. Like that system, bless their hearts, a lot of good, but that system just really doesn't want to get into the complexity. Okay, it is what it is. Like I grew up in that. I owned it. I lived it. You know, I was called into the ministry. I was even pastoring, really trying to live that particular way. Interestingly enough, as simplistic and formulaic as that is, in other parts of my life, I was entertaining things that weren't quite so complex. Weren't quite so simple, that were actually complex. And not only that, they were things I enjoyed about the complexity. For example, even with music, I started realizing, I remember in my late 20s realizing, oh, my favorite kind of music isn't just 3 chords and a really simple whatever. It's got some interesting color to it, some tension, some suspension. It doesn't always resolve. 7ths and 9ths and 11ths, dare I say 13ths even, yes. And so I started thinking, that's fascinating how that is. And then in other areas, like when I would be out hiking, which I love to do. Unfortunately, I live in Kansas, so you don't really call it hiking there, but just work with me when I am in the mountains, like out here in this beautiful area that you get to live in. I noticed, like coming down from the mountains, seeing different colors and seeing obtuse angles and thinking about how beautiful it was and how nature doesn't paint in straight lines, but it's still really beautiful. It's not simple, it's complex. And I started seeing it with people. Like people don't come packaged in the same shape and size, which is not the way I was necessarily conditioned. When I went off to seminary, they basically instructed me how to make people look like, this thing. And then when I got out in the real world, particularly when I started church planting, which was really life-giving and a lot of fun, we were meeting all kind of people that they were different. They didn't fit in that box. And they would leave my office, and I would think, I think that person is as put together, or maybe more put together, more thoughtful, more intentional, more caring than some of the folks who fit in the box. And all of those things served to destabilize me a little bit, disorient me. And I started thinking about things differently. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I can tell what I started to do was take those ideas and to superimpose them over into my speaking. So I would show up on Sunday mornings and I would talk about, hey, you know how music doesn't always have to be these same simple things, and the complexity of suspension and minor chords and these kinds of things are really beautiful. And it was fascinating to watch people's reaction, because I'm somewhat being reductionistic here, but kind of to make a point over time, people would respond by, well, yeah, that's great. The music's beautiful, but, we already got these songs right here. Like, they got 3 or 4 chords. Have you heard of Jesus is the Answer? It's just a really simple thing. Or I would talk about nature, and I would say, have you noticed how beautiful the colors of the sky are when you're coming down from the mountain? Or the obtuse angles, and people would be like, yeah, that's really great, but have you read Genesis 1? It's pretty straightforward, binary, black and white. God made land and water, earth and sky, night and day. I found that was interesting, despite the fact that, there are estuaries and marshlands in between the lands and the waters, despite twilight and dawn, between night and day. And if you thought it was interesting how they were responding when I would talk about music or nature, when I started talking about people being different, I really started to get some interesting feedback. And over time, and I'm now kind of like, it's an amalgamation of all these different conversations over a few years. When I think about it, and I kind of, how when you gaze out into the horizon and you don't look at one specific thing, but you just kind of let your gaze spread out, and how you can kind of, things materialize sometimes. I do this sometimes when I'm trying to figure out an answer to a particular problem or work through something, and I'll just look and see what kind of pops up. And as I look back at those years of interacting with folks, and I see their reactions, and I just let their reactions kind of pop into my gaze, I see bouncing knees and pointing fingers and rising volume and face reddening, nervous eye glancing around. I was trying to bring some kind of like substantive, maybe something about that was beautiful, that didn't fit in a formulaic thing, and it just wasn't really fitting very well into this thing at all. I was reformulating my theology, but there was that system wasn't really ready for that. So I'm very thankful for how all that went. It was very hard. Like, if we had time, I'd tell you about all kinds of crazy things that happened during that time period. But the reality was, what it did was it kind of served to open me up. Like the trees, when the wind blows through the forest and it shakes, and then the roots move down below, and it just creates some space. And that's kind of what was happening in my life. And I started to say it prepared me. I don't think anything can prepare you for what I'm going to talk about. But it did at least serve to loosen the soil enough for me to be able to hold what wound up being the biggest question that I ever had to hold in my life, and continue to this day, really. So New Year's Day, 2015, let me tell you a little bit about this absurd day and this thing that's been happening since then. I woke up early, as I often do, and I was reading, praying, reflecting. We were at my mother-in-law's farmhouse. I was looking through the picture window out over the rolling Kansas hills. It was foggy, kind of like it reminded me of today, driving up here to be with you all. And my reading that morning led me to this strange selection. A guy by the name of Elie Wiesel, I don't know if you're familiar with him, Pulitzer Prize-winning guy who lived through World War II and wrote some beautiful stuff. And maybe his most famous book is called Night. And I was reading night. In the morning, I was reading night. New Year's Day, 2015. The book is full of all kinds of things that are noteworthy, but what particularly arrested my attention that morning was reading about him and his family being drugged from their town in Poland, I think it was to Auschwitz, one of the concentration camps. And then during their time there, at one particular time, the Nazis forced him and a group of men to march underneath 3 young Jewish boys that were being hung. It's this absurd, unconscionable story. And as they're marching underneath these boys, Elie Wiesel hears a voice. Someone cries out and says, "Where is God?" And then another voice says, "Where is God? He's hanging on the gallows with those boys." I don't know how Elie Wiesel, I've read a lot of his stuff and about his life some. I don't know how he reconciled all of that. In some ways, the answer is there is no reconciliation. But as a Jesus follower, as a Christian, by the way, do you see how I hesitated there? Anyone else nervous to call themselves a Christian these days? Okay, take a big breath. Yes, as a Christian. As a Jesus follower, when I read that, and I'm not trying to co-opt Elie Wiesel's story because I respect it, but I also heard an echo of where is God? He's hanging on the cross for the whole world to see. And I remember reading that, and I immediately closed the book. It was such an awkward, holy moment. I thought, I don't deserve, this was 50, 60 years after the fact, to even be reading about this. I just almost wanted to, distance myself from it. And so throughout the rest of that day, I wasn't trying to think of it, neither was I trying not to think of it, to be honest. I just kept hearing that call and response. Where is God? Where is God? He's hanging on the gallows with those boys, cleaning up after the kids and taking the dog for a walk with the family and eating lunch later. Where is God? Where is God? He's hanging on the gallows with those boys. So I'm fast-forwarding through some of the story. I write about it a little bit in Indigo. About 2:30, our daughter, our oldest child, was leaving the farmhouse to go see a friend of hers. It was her first weekend to go spend the weekend with a friend who was a boy and his family. She left about 2:30. We're supposed to get a phone call about 4:30. And how many of you parents know not getting phone calls is the worst kind of not getting something? And about 4:30 we didn't get a phone call, and so 5:30 we start making calls, checking the website. Unbeknownst to us, county-sized sheets of ice had moved in during that time. And so we finally got a hold of someone who wouldn't tell us what happened, but they said a highway patrolman was on their way to see us. And so now it's the end of the day, New Year's Day. I'm back at the picture window. I'm not sitting reading. Now I'm pacing in front of the picture window, looking out over the hills, watching the highway patrolman come down the farm, through the barns, up the hill. And then he's standing in front of my little family of 5, my wife, my boys, my mother-in-law. Jeez, bless the people who have to do these things, to tell a family such news. Yeah, and among other things, he said Quincy didn't make it. There was a car wreck. And then everything just went chaos. Time glitched. I was hearing her in distorted patches of audio and pixelated light, and God, that was hell. And so we did the best we could, and we decided to pack the car up that evening and head back up to Kansas City. We were about 2 hours south of where we live. And as I'm packing the car up, like it's the weirdest, genuinely weird thing. That call and response I'd been hearing all day. In my mind, I can picture, I was putting a bag in and I heard, "Where is God?" And then the next thing I heard is, "Where is God?" He was in the car dying with Quincy. And I whispered, "Maybe it's true. Maybe it's true." Such a shocking thing, as some of you unfortunately know, to lose a daughter. You know, it's not like losing a remote or your keys. It's not like losing. I was reading about, I think it's Steve Wynn. He lost a painting, or he ruined a painting or something, and he was telling someone about how he had lost this priceless painting, and I'm like, bro, you know, priceless, like, you have no idea, like, this is something actually priceless, to lose it. Like, how does this happen? It was such a shock. She was such a force of nature in our family. We never asked her to be, by the way. Do you have people like that in your family? It's just who she was. She was more weather than weather vane. She was more thermostat than thermometer. We didn't assign the role to her. That's what she did from day one. Like, if the boys were in a bad mood, if she wanted to, she could always get them out. But if you flip the script, there's no chance. No one could make her do anything unless she wanted to. And she was a musician and a soccer player, and she'd had these transformative trips to Haiti. By the way, we've been going back to Haiti for the last 11 years, so if anyone wants to help Haitians, see me afterwards. As if the Americans don't need help. Like, we all need a lot of help. So it was a shock to the system, and it changed everything. And if I had more time, I'd talk to you about how it changed me psychologically, because, you know, we're constituted by the people that we're in relationship with, and so when someone's removed from your life, you know, psychologically you're going to be different. If I had time, I would talk to you about how it changed me biologically. Some of you may know about the microbiome, how we share this with our loved ones. Like, literally pieces of our biology are interconnected with them. And so if you've ever heard someone say, so-and-so died and it felt like a part of me died, actually that's kind of true. Part of you has died. Your unit is different. But for our purposes this morning, I'll just say it dramatically, immediately began to change me theologically. How do you fit that inside the container of Jesus is the answer? Like, there was no way. There's just no way. Except, there wasn't a way to fit it inside that formulaic thing, but there was something about the life of Jesus and the fact that he died. And not only did he die, but he died with a question on his lips, my God, why have you forsaken me? There was something about that captivated me and caught my attention, and it kept catching my attention. Of course, I knew the story. I was a pastor, but I had never entered into it at this level. I had always, previous to that, kind of tried to fit it within an answer kind of a thing, but the whole question piece of it was helping me catch like some kind of traction that I never even knew existed before. And I will say the church at first, like church, not only our local church, but the church in general was pretty good. I think one of the things that American Christians do really well, we do tend to rally around people in times of crisis really well. So I'm thankful for that. And what we don't do well is we don't stay there very long. And we expect at some point, especially in this case, the public figure person, to figure out how it all kind of fits within the formula. And we're really afraid of that. I know, genuinely know that your church has already worked through a lot of that, and I'm thankful for that. So I know you guys are good at holding tension, but Americanized Christianity isn't. But love is. And the person I kept thinking that embodied love the best I'd ever heard about was Jesus. And I just kept, thank God, reorienting kind of myself around the enigmatic presence and life and death of Jesus. I mean, the way he shows up in the story, and the nativity story, that was surprising. Like, that catches your attention. And the way he loved was totalizing, and the way he healed was scandalizing, and the way he taught was cogitating, and the way he stood up to the religious elite, frankly, that was thrilling. The way he died, that was incredibly disappointing. But the way he was resurrected, we didn't see that coming. Even more so, the way he was resurrected and then does not hand out violence for violence and shows up as something completely different, that, my friends, was and is revolutionizing. And none of that was fitting into my previous containers. The whole thing became kind of an enigma, like this mystery, like this question, this really interesting thing that kept me coming back. I wasn't finding answer so much as it was a healthy place to hold all of my problems. Yeah, it doesn't preach very well, so sometimes it didn't work. So then, you know what I started singing? I started realizing that Jesus isn't the answer so much as Jesus is the question. In fact, I'll say it this way, this one thing could turn the entirety of American Christianity on its head. And I'll try to say it as provocative as I can to you. Jesus isn't the answer. Jesus is the question, asking us to partner with God to be the answer. Jesus isn't the answer so much as Jesus is the question, asking us to partner with God to come up with answers. And how many of you know our world needs some answers? But they're not going to happen if we just sit back and let God do it, because there are some things that God can't do. God can't physically walk in here and force you to do anything, because I think God is love, and love is an invitation. It's non-coercive. It's consensual. So yeah, then I started singing. Come on, sing it with me. Jesus is the question for a world today. Above him there's no other. Jesus is the way. Jesus is the question for a world today. Above him there's no other. Jesus is the way. There's probably a handful of different ways to go here, but I think that might be a good place to, a denouement, so to speak, to pause. If we're doing good on time, we're about right there. Yeah, we'll do some question and response. I don't have answers, but I might have some responses, but I think I'll close by saying, I still am really compelled by the person and the story and the life and the love of Jesus. And it's funny, when I was a kid, I was too. But that was simplicity. And now it's gone through complexity. But you know, simplicity on the other side of complexity is a different thing than just simplicity that's never gone through complexity. Like, we want our kids to know that God is love. It's one thing to say that when you're 7, but when you're 47 and been through complexity, you realize you've had to work it through some stuff. I think maybe in some ways, I think I'll say this, in some ways, our world, like America, in some ways we're struggling, clearly. We're trying to figure out how to move through this complexity piece so that we can still be the simplicity. You know, I can say to a lot of Americanized Christians that God is love, and they'll say, yes, God is love. But when I ask them to do the homework, it doesn't make any sense. They're just parroting what they've said. Whereas if you go through the complexity, you realize, oh man, there's all these beautiful things going on that there really aren't full answers to, but God still might be love, and there still might be hope. So I wonder if in some ways we're just in that growing pain. I don't know, Pete, I should have had a better way to end it, but now we're going to transition to questions and responses.
First of all, let's thank Jonathan.
Thank you.
Robert here has a microphone. If you've got a question, we'll field those. I'm sure somebody's got something there.
Surely somebody has something they're wondering about.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
I opened your book last night thinking I'll have to read a page or two to get a little ready. I finally had to put it down at about page 50. It's a remarkable book.
Thank you.
Not just what you say, but the way you say it, the simplicity, and the pain of it that you've shared with us today comes through in that book too. The question I want to raise is this sort of event in our lives. We all have horrible loss in our lives.
Yeah.
It's bad enough, but it's even worse if we believe in the kind of God who should have been there and made it otherwise. And I'm thinking that our problem is not with God, but with the way we talk and think about God. We still hang on to Big Daddy in the sky, who should be there doing for us, but with a lot more power than what our little daddy did for us when we were little. But if we do start changing our notion of God, we worry about the whole thing falling apart.
That's right.
There being nothing left.
That's right.
For one thing, if we stop blaming God for the bad things in our lives, and I think we should, then I think we should stop praising God for the good things in our lives. I think we should think of God having something more important to do than to worry about our little puny selves. But I don't like that much either, because I want to be front and center. But anyway, there we are. Thank you, Robert.
I think that's it, Pete. I think you just nailed it. So I don't know why you need me here. That's it. Thank you for that.
Thanks for sharing and being so vulnerable. It's a beautiful thing to come out of something so horrific, right?
Thank you.
You do raise a question. You do raise, this gigantic climactic question that Jesus asks. Have you found an answer for yourself?
You talk about my God, why have you forsaken me? No.
That's fair. Yeah.
This is not a book teaser, but the last page of Indigo is about as good as I can get. So you don't have to buy it. You can just go back there and look at the last page. But I do want to say, I'm not being flippant when I say, I know you know that. If I had longer, and sometimes when I speak a second time on this, I'll actually go into a bit of an answer by saying, yeah, Jesus really isn't the answer, and then the next part is Jesus more the question, but then I go, actually, Jesus, that whole thing, to have the humility to hold that, becomes a type of answer. So my working thing now is Jesus is the answerless answer. But like I said it better in the book. Just read the last page. Over here.
I guess my question, we had a very similar situation in our family. My sister was
Bless
killed
you.
when she was at high school, just graduated from high school. And it truly changed our family and certainly the
Yeah.
DNA within our family. But how did you get through it then? I mean, was it family support? How did you manage to say, I'm going to go on with my life and in fact do great things with my life?
Well, the truth is, part of it is what I'm doing right now. Like, it's kind of absurd, 11 years later, to stand up and talk about this person and to wind up crying publicly. but also it's a lot of fun to talk about her. You know, it's a lot of fun to just, it's helpful. It helps me. So that's one answer. How do we get through this? Yeah, and let me make a point too. Again, I know you guys are I think you're a more mature congregation. There's no reason for any of us to, it's not like I've had it worse than others, or others have had it worse. There's no everyone kind of needs to, I'll speak for myself. I try to stay in my lane on this because I realize, you know, some people, there's really no way to gauge that. There's no way to measure it. But the reality is between death and divorce and deceit and debt and denial, yeah, we've all experienced a lot of things. So life is constantly changing. You're not the same person that you were when you walked in here. Some blood cells have died off, you know, some brain cells. A few of you, I think, more brain cells than some of the others have died off. That was mean. I didn't need to say that. You know, we're different. Our bodies are changing. Everything's constantly in motion. And so how do we get through that? One way is to help pull people around me who understand that basic reality. I know Pete's talked about open and relational theology. I know you've had my friend Tom here, and that's been life-giving to me. The reason is because that theology sees the core of everything being connected and entangled and interrelated. Well, nothing happens in a vacuum, including our ideas of God and love. And so to find other human beings who recognize that too, who recognize that nothing happens for a single reason. There's a complexity of reasons as to why any one thing happens. You know, the winds change on the Sahara Desert, and the Atlantic Ocean changes, and some birds fly and butterflies flap their wings, and then we have storms, you know, on the east coast of the United States. Like, everything is interconnected. So I think it's been really helpful to find those kind of people. But of course, the problem is you have to let go of certain people, and or they let go of you, and that's very hard. So really, all of life is a practice of letting go and leaning into the next thing. And then one day, we'll die, and we'll let go of it all and lean into the next thing. So it's all a practice to die. How's that for an answer? You know, the United Methodists, I love, they'll say, they have a saying, it goes like something like this: live as if you're dying, die as if you're going to life, and live as if you're dying. So I like that. Yes, sir, right over here. How long do you guys usually go? We could go all morning.
I'm walking around, and we're not going all morning.
Okay, without getting too personal,
Yeah.
how has your family processed this, and how have they changed, and how have the relationships changed as a result?
Probably like lots of we've all have families, and we've all gone through things, and it's in constant motion. You know, it's not a problem to be solved. It's a thing to be negotiated all along the way, and yeah, and so there's so many things to say there, but I guess what I'm prompted to think right now is, okay, so that is the reality. Everything's changing, and I think then I'm being invited to enter back into it and bring love and to be patient with all of that. And some of them have not changed at the speed that I have changed, either politically or theologically or relationally or whatever. Others, they just can't. And so, okay, it's frustrating, but also, what am I being invited to do at that point? St. John of the Cross says the mission is to put love where there is no love. I don't know if you're like me, but some days I complain, like, this relationship I have with this person, there's no love. I don't like that. And then the Spirit prompts me and whispers, well, you're supposed to bring the love, because the mission is to put love where there is no love. And then I'm like, crap, I didn't sign up for that. So it's a mess. It's chaotic. It's very hard. But the more I just keep leaning into that love piece, and it helps me. And I also will say personally, like, I'm better friends with my wife than I ever have been. And we have a really special relationship with the boys. Boys don't go to church, but they love God. You all know that, right? We all, They're very musical. Michael's music has influenced my boys a lot, actually. So that's kind of fun, but it's challenging. I don't know. Did that answer the question? Yeah. Yeah. It is hard to watch people process in their own way, and to be fair, I know that it was hard for others to watch us process in our own way. And in fact, in our case, being a pastor, I was literally in real time, my theology, my psychology, my thinking was changing week in and week out, and I have so much compassion now looking back on those people who didn't sign up for that. They came in on a Sunday morning, not expecting their pastor to be a train wreck. Only to a degree. I'm also really proud to be in the middle of all that with them. But yeah, you're right. It's very hard. I think it just invites us to be patient, and love is patient. It says that somewhere in the Bible. And God is love. So anti-patience, so anti-love is impatient. Yeah. Did y'all know Pete had to leave? He had to go to a plane ride, so I guess I'm going to be... Are you going to sing a song, Michael? Cool. Well, let's do one more question then.
Thank you so much for being here today. I might not be able to ask this question.
That's all right. I might not be able to answer it.
The thing about open and relational theology is that it should still be relational, right? Mm-hmm. And one thing I'm struggling with is how to have a relationship with a God. Like, how do I keep praying? Mm-hmm. Because I think so much of my prayer life had been about seeking answers. Mm-hmm. And how do you talk to God if God isn't giving you answers?
Very disrespectfully sometimes. Well, so yeah, like I was suggesting earlier that your partner or your friends with you, so kind of same thing. So it is kind of a subversive answer. It's the answerless answer, and it's the question of all that, and the suspension and all that, and the mystery of all that, for me, kind of keeps me in the fray. Proverbs 25 says, I'm paraphrasing, it's an honor for God to conceal things, and it's an honor for people to seek out the answers. And part of the way I get through is I kind of tell myself every day, like, it's an honorable thing to bang my head against the wall today, and I'm not going to give up today. I'm going to keep after this. The beauty of music helps me hold tension in the space, and again, being out in nature. But your question specifically about prayer life, which it's not like they're separated from prayer life because all these things are interconnected. And so my prayer life has definitely changed. And it's less a list of things that I want God to bless and do. And it's more like, oh, my whole life it genuinely is a prayer, And there's a lot more responsibility with that, like on how I then respond. Like everything I'm doing is a prayer. And so I'm trying to enter in with God and be an answer to these things. I'll just say one other thing, and then because we could talk about this for a while, but I'll try to wrap up here. And it's actually, Tom Ord has a really nice illustration that I think of a lot. I kind of adapted, I think more of like a indigenous dream weaver web kind of a thing. But if you were to imagine us having a ball of string, and I throw the ball of string to you, and you pull it tight. You've all probably done that exercise. And we throw it around the room. After a while, we've got whatever we have, 100 people here with and you pull it really, really tight. You could pluck, someone could pluck conceivably a string, and someone on the other end could feel it. If you now throw that ball of string in between 7 billion people, really tight, but also all the creatures, from small to big. You've got this, like, overly complex, like you can't imagine all these connections. None of us could tap a string and someone else would feel it on the other side. But it's what I think is that there's a universally present spirit of love that actually can. And so as the string gets vibrated, God, I think, feels that. I think, is what I think. And so when I vibrate that string, so to speak, with my requests and my prayers and my fucking pain and my hurt and this world, God, I hope, and I think by faith, because that's what this is about, right? It's experiencing that string being plucked somewhere. And I might not, and someone else might, although with quantum entanglement, they might. So that's a whole other way to look at prayer. By the way, did I just say the F word in front of, like, we could, it's a good thing Pete is gone. Yeah, amen to that. We could strike that. But that omnipresent, like, experiential thing is how I think of God. I don't think of God now above, looking down, but in the midst of all of that. And there's something going on, that God feels our pain. God was in the car dying with my kid, and God was in the cars dying with your kids, right? In your wrecks, in your problems, in your relationships. And by faith, I believe that's true. And that piece of it has evolved, but shifted, but that's the thing I keep leaning into. It's very hard. It's not a great answer. It's very hard. Thank you so much for letting me be here today. I really appreciate it. God bless you.